Hello, hello, hello. What is going on, everybody? Happy Sunday and welcome to the channel. I am your host and your favorite astrologer, Mel of Divine Feminine Works, where I help people unlock their divinity and discover their magic. So if this is our first time meeting, welcome. And as always, if you are returning, welcome back. So speaking of the channel, this channel is everything tarot, astrology, spirituality, and manifestation. So if those are the things you like, if those are the things you love, if those are the things you want to learn more about, don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well as that notification bell so you'll always be notified when I come out with new content. All right, my loves. So this live is kind of an impromptu live. Like I literally just decided this morning that I was going to do this because originally all this information that I'm about to give you, and it's a lot, so get comfortable. You might want to get some drinks, some snacks. You might want to get a pen and paper because I'm giving a lot of valuable information tonight. But this information was really meant to be like an IG post. I did an IG post, but I was going to go a little more in depth. And as I'm writing it, I'm like, no, this kind of deserves its own video because it's a lot of information. And not to mention the fact that it's a lot of information. It's a lot of important information, particularly for this period in time. So the whole purpose of this live is not only to talk about Chiron Retrograde in Aries, which actually starts today, but it's also to get you familiar with Chiron generally, and specifically where Chiron is in your natal chart. So Chiron is, I'm about to get into all of this in a second, but Chiron is literally the key to your life. It can unlock a lot of things in your life, okay? There are many things in your chart that can show you how to get wealth, how to get abundance, how to have great relationships. But you know, once you get on this spiritual journey, you realize that healing is important. And a lot of times, unhealed wounds can really sort of be obstacles to the things that we want. Right? So for instance, let's say that you want a bomb-ass relationship, but you have abandonment issues, or maybe you have issues speaking up or speaking from the heart, right? That's obviously going to stand in the way of having a successful relationship. But you may be wondering, so how do I fix this, right? How do I heal myself? I think that's one of the questions that many of us ask, not only on the spiritual journey, but sort of right now, because I don't know, the way the society is configured with everything going on, like people are really, looking within and trying to figure out, okay, how do I get rid of this emotional baggage that I'm carrying? How can I really have these things without self-sabotaging them, right? The key to all of that is Chiron, okay? And Chiron is a very important component of the natal chart, but it's also often overlooked. Like people kind of mention it, but don't really get in depth. And the importance of Chiron cannot be stated enough. And so my purpose tonight is to teach you all about it, teach you what your Chiron is, how to use it, and then we're going to talk about Chiron and Aries and what it means for all of us. All right. So again, get comfortable, get some snacks, get some drinks, get some pen and paper, because tonight we are learning. Okay, so by the end of this live, you guys will be super knowledgeable about Chiron and how to use it and how to unlock the best version of yourself so that you can have all of the things that you want in this lifetime. All right, so that being said, of course, we start off with announcements and housekeeping. All right, so here on the channel, I do the weekly Astro Forecast live every Monday night. I do the monthly Astro Forecast live on the last Wednesday night of every month. But if you want more, if you want the daily astrology, if you want some other great content, be sure to follow me over on Instagram at Divine Feminine Works. I post 3 to 5 times a day and it's good stuff. All right. So hit me up over there, follow, and get your life. All right. Now, another offering that I have here is, so I started this as just like a text service for your horoscope, right? So if you wanted your horoscope, you could subscribe to my text service and get your horoscope every Monday. I've since expanded it, right? So it's more about joining a community, right? So whatever sign you're interested in learning more about, whether you want to get horoscopes, whether you want to get detailed information, whether you want to get specific products or tips or anything like that, you'll definitely want to sign up for my Astro community. So to do that, you will text the word Zodiac to the number 855-826-5544. All right. And that information is going to be in the description box below. Not only will you get your weekly horoscope, but you'll also get a whole bunch of other cool stuff as well. All right. So definitely sign up. People like it. Seems to be going pretty well. So definitely sign up. And again, that information is in the description box below. And as always, if you are someone who is new to astrology and you have no idea what's going on, or maybe you started studying astrology, but you realize that it's a lot and it's kind of a lot to maintain and sort of make sense of, I created this thing called the Astrology Basics Cheat Sheet, which basically gives you the quick and dirty on everything you need to know to start studying astrology, mainly the 4 pillars of astrology, which are the planets, the houses, the zodiac signs, and the aspects. All right. So this is an 11-page PDF document that basically gives you the quick and dirty on all of these things, right? So that you can start committing them to memory, because regardless of what anyone says or doesn't say, astrology is definitely a science. Now, it's a science mixed with some other things, but it's definitely a science nonetheless. And like any science, it requires a good deal of study. So if you want to get this cheat sheet, it is completely free. All you have to do is check the description box below for the link, add your email address, and you will be good to go. All right. So, look at how all of these just pop up. I love this. Technology is wonderful sometimes, isn't it? All right. So again, to reiterate, we are talking all about Chiron. All right. And so Chiron going retrograde in Aries is really, I think it's really important for the sheer fact that in addressing some of these emotional wounds and traumas as it relates to Aries characteristics, we're really given the green light to start creating and going after new things in our lives. Remember, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It's all concerned with our desires. It's concerned with starting new things. And sometimes, while we may feel motivated to start new things, if we've got a lot of emotional baggage, if we're holding on to a lot of stuff, it may be hard to get started, right? It's almost like sitting on the floor with a backpack full of bricks and then trying to get up and start running. It can be kind of challenging. So Chiron retrograde in Aries, although it can be emotionally triggering, although it can be challenging, being able to use the energy to your advantage and getting through it is going to give you, like I said, the green light to start creating things and really going after the things that you want. All right. So with that being said, let's get into tonight's presentation and start learning. All right. So like I said, tonight we are talking all about Chiron retrograde. Okay. So Chiron is known as the wounded healer. Chiron is the key that unlocks your ability to experience heaven on earth. All right. I know that's a loaded statement. So what exactly does that mean? So when we are able to successfully manifest the things that we want, when we are in spiritual alignment without sort of all of this emotional turmoil, maybe even some karmic debt that we have accumulated from past lives, we are really able to ascend. And it's in that ascension process that we are able to experience heaven on earth. I think the best way to describe it is, how you'll see all over the news that there's a recession or an impending recession, and you've got people who are living super scared. And then you have other people who seem to be thriving, right? Like it seems like there's no recession in their lives. Like they're untouched by this whole concept of a recession, right? They are living in paradise amidst chaos. And that's kind of how using your Chiron energy can allow you to live as well. Everyone else could be going through some craziness. Everyone else could be going through turmoil. But meanwhile, you're chilling. Not only are you chilling, you're thriving. And a lot of that has to do with Chiron. Like I said, it is an often overlooked component of our natal chart, but super, super important. All right. So this is the agenda for tonight's lesson. First up, we're going to talk about what is Chiron, because I'm pretty sure that if you are new to astrology, or even if you're sort of familiar with astrology, you may not be super familiar with what Chiron is. So first off, we're going to start at the baseline and learn exactly what Chiron is. Then we're going to move on to where's your Chiron. So I'm going to go into a somewhat elaborate discussion of Chiron through the houses and the signs, because knowing what Chiron is currently doing, aka Chiron being retrograde in Aries, is good. But how does that relate to your particular Chiron? Right? Because whatever Chiron is doing right now may bring up a certain amount of trauma. But what your particular Chiron is doing, right, may also trigger some other things. So it's important to know where your Chiron is in your natal chart. And then finally, we're going to discuss Chiron retrograde in Aries, how long that's going to last, and what it's going to mean for each sign. All right. So this might be a little bit of a longer live, right? So I said get comfortable, but it's going to be super informative. All right. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Okay. So first up, what is Chiron exactly? Okay, so astrologically speaking, Chiron is an asteroid or a comet, all right? So it's not a planet, it's a celestial body. I feel like people in the astrology/astronomy community, they're always debating what Chiron is. Not so much what it is, it's what's more important is what it represents. And it's located somewhere between Saturn and Uranus, okay? So Chiron takes approximately 49 to 50 years to move through all of the zodiac signs, okay? So it spends quite a bit of time in a particular sign, like several years, basically. And so being between Saturn and Uranus, Chiron shows us how we limit ourselves, aka Saturn, and how we can break free of those limitations, aka Uranus. All right. And this is sort of the crux of how Chiron works in our chart. It shows us how we limit ourselves because of the wounds that we carry, because of the trauma that we have endured. And at the same time, it also shows us how we could break free of that. That's that unlocking that Chiron can really do for us. Okay. All right. So I am someone who is very interested in mythology, because mythology, whether it's Egyptian, whether it's Greek or Roman or African or whatever, it's really a way of storytelling to help us understand concepts. And the mythology of Chiron really helps you to understand exactly what it is, what it represents, and what it means for you. Okay. So Chiron is known as the wounded healer, and Chiron is a centaur. Okay, so Chiron is half man, half horse. Like, those Old Spice commercials where it's that dude, he's half man, half horse, and he's like in the shower, which I think is so side note and a personal note about me. When it comes to centaurs, mermaids, anything that's half human, half animal, like that used to seriously freak me out as a kid. Still kind of freaks me out now, but it is what it is. Anyway, so the mythology of Chiron is that Chiron is a child that was born half horse, half man, and he was also the result of an affair. So not only was he like a child out of wedlock, but he was also half man, half horse, which could be whatever. But his mother, seeing him as half horse, half man, was like, yeah, nah, this ain't it. So she abandoned him. So this is where the trauma begins. So the mythology of Chiron, based off what I just spoke about, demonstrates the fact that the trauma and the emotional wounds that Chiron addresses or that Chiron pertains to is typically emotional wounds from childhood. So whenever we are working with Chiron energy, especially with this Chiron retrograde, we're going to have to go back in time to our childhood, perhaps to things that we may not even remember. Okay. So after being abandoned by his mother, he was adopted by Apollo, the god of the sun. And in being adopted by Apollo, Chiron was able to learn many things like music, like medicine. And as a result, he became a gifted leader, teacher, and healer. So as he grew up, despite his wounds, Chiron was able to excel. And if you really read the story of Chiron mythology, he was like the leader of the centaurs. Like he was like the head honcho. Like he was the head centaur in charge. All right. Like he really excelled in what he was doing and in his skills. Now, here's where things get interesting. So Chiron volunteered to replace Prometheus. And if you're not familiar with Greek mythology, Prometheus is the mortal who was responsible for bringing fire to man. Fire was originally something for the gods, and Prometheus stole it and gave it to man here on earth. And for that, he was severely punished. So his punishment was that he was chained to a rock where every day an eagle would eat his liver completely. And then at night, the liver would regrow. So he spent every day in excruciating pain. Chiron, being someone who sort of empathizes with people, decided to trade places with Prometheus. So for Prometheus to go, Chiron volunteered to take on this thing. Essentially, he volunteered to take on this wound, right? So he wasn't chained to a rock, but he was basically mortally wounded in his thigh, all right? So the interesting part is, although Chiron was a healer, he couldn't heal himself. And so, I forgot to mention before, but Chiron was like mortal and immortal because he was half a god, half man. And when he decided to take on this wound, he wounded his mortal part of himself, right? And so in doing so, he gave up his immortality. And so Zeus, who was, the god of all gods, took pity on him and turned him into a constellation where he would be remembered for all time. So essentially, the mythology of Chiron is that we have these wounds that we typically developed from childhood. And we willingly take on these wounds, maybe for the sake of other people. It's almost this element of sacrifice, right? And it kind of makes sense based off what I said before, that these wounds limit us. We sacrifice the things that we want because we are holding on to these wounds, okay? Now, what ends up happening is that once you address these wounds, right, you sort of become immortal. You become, this is, like I said, it unlocks heaven on earth for you. That's why Chiron is so super important, not only in astrology, not only in your natal chart, but definitely right now as it goes retrograde, okay? All right, so now we're going to get into the discussion of where is your Chiron. So Chiron in the natal chart. The placement of Chiron in your natal chart shows you where you have emotional wounds. I'm sorry, this whole chart, I really did this on the fly. So this whole chart has a whole bunch of grammatical errors, and the Virgo in me is like cringing right now. So yeah. The placement of Chiron in your natal chart shows you where you have emotional wounds, insecurities, and or traumas that you likely incurred in childhood. Its sign and house give you more information as to what those traumas are and where they stem from. So Chiron in your natal chart also shows you where you can be a healer to others. Okay. So the interesting thing about Chiron, especially the mythology of Chiron, and please understand that the slides I just showed you with respect to the mythology is a very truncated version of the mythology. There's a lot more, but I just want to give you the basics right now. So essentially, the other component to Chiron is that the same wounds that you have, those same emotional wounds, you're actually able to help heal in other people. So for instance, if you have Chiron like in your first house, or if you have Chiron in like Aries or Taurus, you typically have insecurities about yourself or your body or self-worth, right? But coincidentally and surprisingly, these are the same things that you're able to help other people heal from, okay? So Chiron is super important, not just for you and your overall well-being, but actually for the well-being of others, because it's sort of like we heal ourselves, we heal others. And that's how not only everyone heals, but everyone ascends and elevates. That's why Chiron is super important. Okay. So let's get into Chiron in each of the signs and houses. Okay. So the way that this goes is, so it says Chiron in Aries or first house. So if you have Chiron in Aries or you have Chiron in your first house, this is the information that will apply. Okay. So Chiron in Aries or your first house typically denotes a wound related to being shamed for being yourself or going after what you want. Perhaps as a child, sort of expressing yourself, you were either punished or shamed for that. Or you may have had like a disability or a deformation that people shamed you for, or that you were sort of abandoned because of. And obviously that left a very particular deep emotional wound and trauma, right? However, the best use of Chiron energy, right, in order to heal that wound, you need to learn how to assert yourself and courageously embark on a mission of self-discovery. So it's really about getting comfortable with who you are and what you want, and expressing that fully, embodying that fully, and going after what you want with confidence. It's almost like you have to fight the urge to give in to however people are making you feel about yourself. You really have to just be like, you know what? This is who I am. This is what I want. And I'm going to do it regardless of what you say. All right. So that's Chiron in Aries. Next up, we've got Chiron in Taurus or Chiron in your second house. So the wound associated with this stems from being made to feel insecure, unsafe, or inadequate. Or there could also have been strings attached to any resources given. So basically what that means is people made you feel bad about yourself, or they made you feel unworthy of having things. Second house also covers money, right? Taurus and second house cover money and resources. So when it came to money, right, or resources in general, there may have been strings attached to those, right? Like a parent saying, I'll give you money, but you have to do it exactly how I want you to do it. Or I'm going to give you money, but you can only buy the things that I tell you to buy, right? So inherent in that is also a lack of autonomy, right? Sort of being beholden to the whims of someone else when it comes to resources. So the way to use this energy is to learn how to build your self-esteem and self-worth, and realize that you can provide your own security. Okay, so security is an inside job. Learning how to provide for yourself, and learning and understanding and realizing that you are worthy. You are worthy exactly as you are. All right. So next up, we've got Chiron in Gemini or Chiron in your third house. So the wound associated with this Chiron placement has a lot to do with being made to feel stupid or being shamed for speaking up. Alternatively, it could have a lot to do with being punished for telling the truth, okay? You know how as children, a lot of times, have you ever heard the phrase like, children are meant to be seen, not heard? So perhaps you were a talkative child. Perhaps you were someone who would tell the truth to or about adults. Okay. You know how, especially not for nothing, especially if you grew up in like a West Indian or a Caribbean household, like you were told to, you learned really quick to shut the fuck up. Okay. And so whenever you spoke up, you were punished or shamed for it. Or when it came to your level of intelligence, you were perhaps made to feel stupid, or you were told that you were stupid. Okay. So now, in order to best use the energy of Chiron, you need to learn how to be confident in sharing what you know and what you believe. This is the placement where you are meant to speak up. You are meant to tell the truth, speak your truth, exercise your throat chakra, regardless of what anyone has to say. Okay. And so when I say working with this Chiron energy, it's almost like you've got to break the barrier. And that barrier is the emotional wound or that trauma. And it's not easy by any stretch of the imagination. And it's not something that's going to be done perhaps in like one sitting. Some of these things may require therapy. Some of these things may require shadow work over an extended period of time. All of these sort of require you to be fearless and to push past these limitations. But don't get it twisted. I'm not trying to say that this is easy or that, you just do a little thing or do a little ritual and it kind of works out. Like, this is work that is ongoing. Okay. Next up, we've got Chiron in Cancer or Chiron in the 4th house. Now, this placement cuts deep because, Cancer is a water sign. Water has everything to do with emotions. If we're talking about Chiron, we're talking about emotional wounds. So you may be deeply wounded emotionally, especially when it comes to a mother or mother figure. Okay. So the wound associated with this Chiron placement has a lot to do with being abandoned, not being nurtured. So lack of nurturing resulting in oversensitivity and repressed emotions. Okay. So you may literally have been abandoned by your mother or a mother figure, or you may have had a mother that was emotionally detached, didn't give you any love and nurturing, or maybe you weren't allowed to express your emotions. Like, you may have been shut down. It's almost like there was a wet blanket thrown on your emotions. Or you just weren't given the space to nurture the things that you wanted or needed in your life, okay? 4th house has a lot to do with our basic emotional needs. So if you were anything like homeless, if you lacked food as a child, if you grew up in a household that was cold and unnurturing, that indelibly left wounds related to what I'm talking about right now, okay? So to use this energy, right, to use the Chiron energy with this Chiron placement, you're going to want to learn how to consciously confront your emotional blockages and nurture yourself. With anything, everything is an inside job. Everything starts and ends with you. Whatever you are lacking from someone on the outside, whatever you're lacking in the external, in your 3D reality, we all, to a certain extent, have to learn to provide these things for ourselves first. And don't get me wrong, that can be super challenging, especially with a Chiron placement that's in Cancer or in the 4th house. Because how can you learn to nurture yourself if you've never experienced nurturing before, if you've never felt love, if you've never felt warmth? How can you actually do that? Well, that's something that you have to cultivate over time. And it all starts with addressing your emotions. How do you feel about mothering or motherhood? How do you feel about providing a home for yourself or for others? That's how you start, and that's how you start addressing this particular wound. All right. Next up, we've got Chiron in Leo or Chiron in the 5th house. So 5th house has everything to do with our self-expression, right? If we're, the zodiac, all of the signs represent the stages of life. Aries is the baby. Pisces is the elderly person, right? So when you get to the 5th house, when you get to Leo, this is where the child expresses their unique personality. This is where you create and express yourself, okay? So when it comes to Chiron in Leo or Chiron in the 5th house, you were probably shamed or punished for expressing yourself. Now, because the 5th house, the natural ruler of the 5th house, the natural sign of the 5th house is Leo, and the natural ruler of the 5th house is the sun. So this is being bold and out there and really expressing yourself. And what just came to mind is people who were shamed, right? Because Leo also has a lot to do with the heart. Heart has to do with love. People being shamed for being homosexual, people being shamed for expressing love, right? You may have Chiron in Leo, you may have Chiron in the 5th house. And so, expressing yourself was a problem. You were told maybe you were too much in the spotlight. You're attention seeking. And so people would probably tend to try to knock you off your square or bring you down a couple of notches because you just may be too much. All right. And so with this Chiron placement, you probably end up having a wounded child, a wounded inner child, where now as an adult, things that you would want to do, you're hesitant because you don't know how people are going to receive you. You don't want to you don't want to express yourself to the full extent. You don't want to authentically express yourself because you're afraid that people are going to shut you down. You don't want to go for the lead role, right? Because you're afraid that people are going to tell you you're too much or you're too extra, okay? So to use the energy of Chiron in this placement, you need to learn how to confidently express yourself and to give and receive love, right? Because this placement also has a tendency to not want to express themselves in relationships. Saying I love you may be difficult. Receiving love from someone who loves you may also be difficult. So it's about learning to express yourself regardless of what anyone has to say, as quirky and as unique and as creative as you may be. And again, to also give and receive love. All right. So next up, we've got Chiron in Virgo, or Chiron in the the sixth house. So you know that Virgo energy is very analytical, it's very detail oriented, and it's very perfectionist. So people with this placement are probably people who were perfectionists, who were detail oriented, or people who were kind of know-it-alls. You know, Virgo energy has a tendency to be very knowledgeable because Virgo has the ability, and, you know, they have a great ability to analyze the information around them and reduce it in a way that makes sense. So they can come off very know-it-all-ish. And so if you have Chiron in Virgo or in the sixth house, you may be someone who was criticized for being a know-it-all, or criticized for being a perfectionist or doing things well. I'll give you a perfect example. Let's say that you're in your family, right? And in your family, you tend to do things a little better than everyone else. Maybe you do things better than your parents, or maybe you're a little smarter than your parents, okay? That may trigger their insecurities. And so when it comes to whatever you have to say, whatever you're doing, they sort of they criticize you. They overly criticize you because they don't want to admit that you're really good at what you do or that you're really smart, okay? You could have also have been made to feel like you weren't good enough. That's sort of contrary to being a perfectionist, right? Being a perfectionist, like, you show up well, you present yourself well. And so people may have made you feel like, oh, what you're doing isn't good enough. You're not perfect. What, you think you can do this? No, you can't. So those are sort of the things that you may have heard as a child, and not only heard, but internalized. And so that made you feel like you weren't good enough. Or now what happens is you are overly self-critical. You may know things really well. You may be really good at what you do, but you're constantly criticizing yourself. That negative talk in your head is really loud. So it prevents you from actually doing things because you're like, no, I can't do that. No, I'm not going to do it well enough. Oh my God, people are going to say this, that, and the third about it, right? So that's the wound that you currently carry. And so the best use of this energy is to learn how to speak up about what you know. Like, don't be afraid to be that perfectionist. Don't be afraid to let people know that you know what you're doing and that you are capable. And you do this by being of service to others, or perhaps even mentoring others. Again, don't be afraid to shine. Don't be afraid to let people know that, yeah, I do know what I'm doing. And not only do I know what I'm doing, I do it really well too. Okay. Next up, we've got Chiron in Libra, or Chiron in the seventh house. Now, Libra has a lot to do with relationships. So the way that you relate to people, perhaps in your childhood, may have been tumultuous. It may have been very one-sided, right? Libra, ruled by Venus, has a lot to do with looks and with an aesthetic. So perhaps as a child, you were told that you were unattractive, or you were made to feel like you were unattractive. You may have had parents that were absent, right? Because Libra's all about relationships. If the other person isn't there, then you don't have a relationship with them, right? You may have had parents that were not around, or you may have been exposed to relationships that were dysfunctional or unhealthy. And so now as an adult, you are someone who may self-sabotage relationships because of your insecurities related to how you look or how you show up in relationships. Or you just don't know how to have healthy relationships because you've never had that blueprint, right? And so this is the wound that you carry right now. And so now, in order to overcome this, you're going to learn how to be confident and trusting in your relationships. So even if you were exposed to relationships that were dysfunctional, and as a result, you don't trust relationships because you feel like you're always going to get into dysfunctional relationships, or dysfunction is going to find itself into your relationships. You have to learn to trust yourself and trust your counterpart to know that things are not going to be dysfunctional. And also how to be confident, right? To find your inner beauty or even your outer beauty, okay? And your challenge is also learning how to have healthy relationships despite whatever you were exposed to as a child, okay? Next up, we've got Chiron in Scorpio or Chiron in the 8th house, okay? Chiron in Scorpio, the 8th house, this might be one of the most difficult Chiron placements, okay? Because Scorpio has a lot to do with repressed emotions, and it has a lot to do with like abuse, violence, manipulation, betrayal, okay? So if you're someone who has Chiron in Scorpio or in the 8th house, first of all, be easy on yourself. The work that you may need to do may be extensive. Not to say that it automatically is, but it may be. And you may be someone who wants to seek out therapy, or someone that you really trust, okay? So this may have been abuse, whether it was physical, whether it was sexual, whether it was molestation, being manipulated by your parents, or anyone in your immediate vicinity in childhood. You may have also been betrayed by someone who you had an intimate relationship with, like a parent, okay? It also may be feeling unwanted, feeling abandoned, or you may have experienced violence in your childhood, or you may have witnessed violence in your childhood. All right. These are heavy stuff. Whenever we're talking about Scorpio energy, it's always intense. It's always pretty heavy too. So again, this placement tends to be quite challenging in order to work through. So your task now is learning how to transmute that trauma into positive transformation. It's not so much eradicating it, right? It's really taking that and alchemizing it into a positive transformation in your life. Anytime we're talking about Scorpio energy, regardless of what planet or what celestial body is in Scorpio, we're talking about the phoenix rising from the ashes. It's almost like you kind of have to set fire to that wound. You have to set fire to sort of your old life and use that as fuel to rise from the ashes of that fire. Okay. Again, this is a difficult placement, and you're going to want to seek perhaps therapy or do some extensive shadow work over time in order to be able to transmute and rise from the ashes like the phoenix that you are. Trust and believe. If you have these placements, and again, this is Chiron in Scorpio or Chiron in the 8th house, you are built for this. I want to repeat that again. You are built for this. We're never given more than we can handle, whether we believe that or not, but it's true. And you are someone who is meant to transform your life in such a profound way, but not just that. You're meant to transform the lives of others in profound ways. Do not sleep on this. With any Chiron placement, we may tend to fall victim to our wounds and our traumas, right? Or we may feel like we can never overcome them, especially this particular placement. However, understand that as great as the trauma is as great as the breakthrough. I'm going to say that again. As great as the trauma is as great as the breakthrough. As hard as it is, as limiting as it is, it can be expansive and it can be freeing just as much. That's why Chiron is so important, because as much as it limits you, as much as it locks you into a tiny room that you feel like you can't get out of, it can unlock the entire universe for you. Anything you want, you can have. More so once you've addressed Chiron in your natal chart, okay? Next up, we've got Chiron in Sagittarius or Chiron in the 9th house. So if you've got this placement, you were likely punished for standing up for your beliefs. And it's sort of like a bird with clipped wings, meaning that you were limited in your expansion. This is another one of those placements where you may have had people who brought you down a couple of notches or who limited your expansive ability. Chiron in Sagittarius has a lot to do. Well, Sagittarius energy has a lot to do with faith and beliefs, and perhaps even higher knowledge. So perhaps you were also told that you were stupid, or, you tried to express yourself, express your beliefs, and you were ridiculed, shamed, or punished, right? Again, it's that bird with clipped wings, like wanting to fly and soar, but being limited by the people around you, okay? And so now, as an adult, you're probably someone who plays small. Sagittarius, the energy of Sagittarius is larger than life. And so you may have been someone who was limited. Maybe you were told you were too much, or you're too extra, or you're doing the most. And so now as an adult, you play small. You try not to do that much because you don't want to be told that, because it hurts, right? So now your task is to learn how to explore and expand. Teach what you know, live what you believe, and don't be afraid to take up space. Okay? You have much to teach. Regardless of how old you are, Chiron in this placement speaks to innate wisdom. Perhaps as a kid, you demonstrated the fact that you had wisdom. And adults were probably like, what are you talking about? You're a kid. You don't know. You can't possibly know that. And so again, you started to second guess what you know. And so now as an adult working with this Chiron energy, you are urged to teach what you know, regardless of how scary that may be. And you are meant to take up space and expand and explore without feeling limited or without people telling you you're doing the most or you're doing too much. Okay. Next up, we've got Chiron in Capricorn, or Chiron in the 10th house. So Capricorn has a lot to do with success and achievement. So perhaps as a child, you were shamed, ridiculed, or unsupported for your goals and ambitions. Perhaps you wanted to join the track team and you had a parent that said, well, you can't run fast. That you're never going to make it. You're never going to succeed. Shooting down your dreams and goals, okay? Another expression of this Chiron placement is having like a strict and oppressive upbringing. So perhaps you had a father figure that was super strict, whether it's a father or a father figure, and your upbringing was very oppressive. You were limited. You couldn't do anything. And so that hampered your ability to achieve things, because maybe you wanted to be in music, or maybe you wanted to go to dance class and you were told we don't have the money for that, or you had such a strict upbringing that you had to be like, if you're not in school, you're at home. If you're not at home, you're at church, right? Like you had a strict upbringing that didn't allow for goals and dreams and ambitions that you had personally, okay? And so now you are to learn how to claim authority over your life and to confidently achieve your goals. So going back to having a strict upbringing, that could shape how you are as an adult. Let's say that, you had to have dinner at 6 o'clock every night, and that was ingrained in you, right? To the point where if you didn't have dinner at 6, there was like severe consequences. Now as an adult, you're like, well, I can't do anything at 6 o'clock because I have to have dinner. And people probably look at you like, what? Like you're an adult. So this may be living out your parents' rules even as an adult, even if they don't make sense. Even if it prevents you from going after certain things that you want to achieve, you're still living under the strict dictatorship of your parents or whoever raised you, right? And so now with this Chiron placement, you are being urged to claim your own authority, to be your own adult, and to achieve the things that you want to achieve, and to go after the goals and the things with which you want to succeed, okay? Next up, we've got Chiron in Aquarius, or Chiron in the 11th house. So Aquarius is very quirky. Aquarius is outside of the box. Aquarius speaks their mind. They can be otherworldly, okay? So perhaps as a child, you were being shamed or punished for being your unique, quirky self. You might have also been punished for original thinking. Okay. One of the phrases that came to mind when I was putting this together is that I remember people would tell kids like, "Oh, you've got your head in the clouds. Oh, you're a space cadet. Like, what are you talking about? That makes no sense. Like, you make no sense. Get your head out of the clouds. Like, you need to focus on what's going on right now." Or perhaps you were someone who was just really unique. You had a unique perspective on life, and that was shut down with the quickness. Like, unless you thought like everybody else, expressing your unique ideas was perhaps shot down, shamed, or ridiculed. Okay. And so, of course, that left a mark on you where you may have original ideas, especially when it comes to improving things or inventing things, but you're just like, nah, people are going to make fun of me. Or no, people are going to think I don't make any sense. Or they're going to think I'm weird, right? This is the wound that you carry now. And so in this life, right, you are learning how to express yourself and your intelligence confidently. Be quirky, be outside of the box. If you have this placement, you are likely someone who can lead people in new directions, but you may be so afraid to do that because you're afraid of everyone turning against you or everyone laughing at you or shaming you, or you may think that there are dire consequences for going left when everyone goes right. But you are meant to I want to say transgress, but that's not the right word. You are meant to move past all of that fear and allow your quirky personality to shine through. Speak your original ideas, because trust it, we need it right now. We need people like you to think outside the box and lead us into the Aquarian age, okay? And then last but not least, we have Chiron in Pisces, or Chiron in the 12th house. This is another placement that can be kind of difficult because this is the emotions run deep, right? So you may have very deep wounds, okay? So you may have been isolated as a child. You may have been literally left alone. No warmth, no emotion in your house. You may have experienced deceit from parents or close family members, or you may have been exposed to emotional turmoil. Maybe you grew up in a house that was emotionally abusive, or people were always fighting. And as a result, you would sort of hide, or you would try to do anything to escape that emotional turmoil, because with this placement, you feel these things very strongly. Okay. You feel emotional turmoil very strongly. You're able to pick up on other people's emotions. And if it's emotional overload, you probably isolated or tended to escape. And so now, in order to work through these wounds and transcend, that was the word I was looking for before. Transcend these wounds, you're going to want to learn how to heal your emotional wounds and how to connect with spirit. Pisces is a very spiritual sign. Perhaps you experienced trauma related to spirituality. Maybe the religion that, your parents or your family belonged to was manipulative or deceptive. One of the things that's coming to mind right now is that maybe your family was involved in a cult, or maybe some sort of extremist religion, or maybe people were using religion or faith in order to manipulate you or deceive you. Like, those are pretty traumatic wounds, right? And so it may cause you to denounce religion altogether, denounce God. Like, you're just like, yeah, you may be an atheist now. You may not believe in a higher power because that higher power was wielded over you in an unhealthy way. Okay. And so now you may find that it's time to find your way back to spirit in a healthy sort of way, and to deal with the emotional turmoil that you may have absorbed as a child. Okay. Again, this placement, along with, so Pisces, Cancer, and Scorpio, those Chiron placements people tend to feel it a lot more because those are the water signs, right? So again, your task is to learn how to heal those emotional wounds, address them, and transcend them. All right. So that was basically Chiron in your natal chart. Okay. We haven't gotten to Chiron in Chiron retrograde. We're about to get that into a second. However, I want to open the floor now to questions. So if you guys have questions on your particular Chiron placement or anything that I have mentioned so far, you'll want to put that in the chat. Okay. Put 3 question marks before your question so I know it's a question, and so I'll be able to answer it as we go along. All right. And I also wanted to take this opportunity to give us a little break because that was a lot of information, right? I don't want to overload you too much. And so I wanted to talk about something that is super important. I wanted to talk about something that is super important. Sorry, I just repeated myself. And that is knowing your natal chart. Okay. Knowing your natal chart is of the utmost importance because it is the blueprint to your life, not just your Chiron placement, but all of your important placements. When you are familiar with your natal chart, you are able to know yourself, heal yourself, and have the things that you want in this lifetime. All right. So I wanted to talk about my signature offering, which is the blueprint. So you get a natal chart report plus a natal chart consultation. So you get the report first, and then we have a 60-minute consultation where we discuss it all, and you can ask questions. I also pull cards for you. Like it's not even just the whole vibe. It is meant to introduce you or reintroduce you to yourself in a way that's productive, that's constructive, that's healing, and that may motivate you to finally start achieving the things that you want. Okay, perfect example. Let's say that you are like, listen, I want to get married, okay? And maybe you're in your 30s. So the opportunity to get married passed you by. Now you're in your 30s and you're like, oh my gosh, it is so hard to find a partner. Why is that? Well, you can take a look at your 7th house, and maybe you've got Saturn in your 7th house. Saturn in your 7th house typically denotes that you get married later in life, or you have obstacles to getting married or obstacles to get into a partnership. Now, you would not know that necessarily had you not looked at your natal chart. And in this service that I offer, called the Blueprint, we go through it all. I talk about your relationships. I talk about your finances. I even put some numerology in there. So I'll talk about your life path number. I talk about the important aspects in your natal chart. I talk about your Chiron, plus I pull some cards. All right. So this is the service that you do not want to miss. If you have not booked any service with me, but you are curious about your natal chart or you really want to know about yourself, book this service. All right. And so this is going to be linked not only in the description box below, but also in the video. So I would definitely encourage you to sign up. I've got ample availability for the next 2 months. So you're going to want to book it because I have a feeling that these slots are going to go by quickly. All right. So definitely get into that. All right. So now that we've gotten that out of the way and we've taken a little break, let's move back into our presentation, and we will talk about Chiron retrograde. All right. So Purple Butterflies 80. Yes, she said, I had a natal chart reading and it was amazing. Thank you so much, my love. I remember our consultation and it was super dope. Okay. So the proof is in the pudding, my loves. Definitely get into it. All right. All right. And so we do have a question. So let's see what we've got right here. Okay, so Linda says, my Chiron in Pisces, can you speak more on this? What is needed to heal? All right, so yes, I most definitely can. So Chiron in Pisces. Again, this could be wounds related to childhood having to do with spirituality, okay? It could be that you were literally abandoned or isolated. Or you may have grown up in a household that was emotionally tumultuous. This could be parents fighting, siblings fighting. You know, it's just a situation where things were emotionally tumultuous. There may have been abuse. It may not have been you being abused, but you could have witnessed abuse. And as a result, you may have found that you tried to escape, right? So maybe you started addictive behaviors early on in life. So maybe you got into alcohol or maybe drugs early on in life in order to escape the emotional turmoil that you were experiencing or exposed to at home. Or maybe you grew up in a situation or a household where spirituality was a big thing, but maybe it was used against you, or maybe it was like a cult like situation, or a situation where spirituality was extremist, right? And as a result, maybe now you are someone who isn't into spirituality. Maybe you've denounced God. Maybe you're an atheist. Maybe you're just like, I don't want to touch religion with a 10-foot pole because as a kid, it was like shoved down my throat, or I felt like I was being manipulated with religion. Okay. And so, with that being said, now it's the time for you to sort of reconnect to your spirituality. And again, spirituality doesn't have to be religion, it could just be your relationship with Source, universe, your higher self, whatever you believe in, right? It's also about addressing those emotional wounds. Again, Pisces is a sign that likes to escape. So whenever you felt something as a child, and it could be trauma, it could be wounding, it could be whatever, you didn't want to feel it. You escaped it, or you used something in order to not feel what you were feeling. And so now, in order to transcend this wound, you have to feel these things. You have to face these wounds, and you have to work through them. Okay. Oh, wow. Okay, Linda. I thank you for sharing that. Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. Yes, that's exactly sort of the way that a Pisces Chiron, or Chiron in the 12th house, would sort of work. Okay. So you're meant to be a spiritualist. You're meant to be, someone who can heal others with that same kind of wound. And in doing so, you sort of connect to universe, you connect to Source, and you're able to really connect to yourself, your higher self, in transcending these wounds. Okay. So hopefully that answered your question. All right. So now let's move on to Chiron retrograde. So currently, Chiron is retrograde in Aries. So what does this mean? Chiron retrograde in Aries. So anytime a planet goes retrograde, it's a time to turn within. Just like Mercury retrograde, even though it is full of mishaps, miscommunication, and foolishness and fuckery, right? It's actually a time to turn within and reflect. All right. Same thing with Chiron retrograde. We're given opportunities to reflect, remember, re-examine, and most importantly, release. It's not just about knowing your wounds. It's also about releasing them as well. All right. And Chiron retrograde is no exception. So for this retrograde, we will be re-examining our emotional wounds, our emotional traumas, and our insecurities. Okay. And so Chiron is actually going to be retrograde from now until December 26th. So basically, the remainder of 2023 is an opportunity to address these things. Now, you can either do it like voluntarily, right? Like by doing shadow work and really taking a look at where Aries is in your natal chart. Okay. Because apart from where Chiron is in your natal chart, those are wounds that you've had since childhood, right? Chiron retrograde in Aries, you're going to look at wherever Aries is in your natal chart. And this will let you know sort of what you need to work on. And I'm going to get to all of that information in a minute. All right. So Chiron retrograde in Aries, it's going to be Aries themes that we're going to be reflecting on. So this is things like anger management, and rage. Okay. It's also going to be self-esteem issues, body issues, lack of ambition, feelings of abandonment, and people pleasing. So these are the underlying themes that may come up during this retrograde season. And so again, you can do this voluntarily depending on where Aries is in your natal chart. You may decide to, consciously and intentionally work on these things, or you may be presented with opportunities to work on these things via relationships or via events that happen that trigger these things within you. Okay. So again, retrograde is always a period of time where we reflect, and so where we can heal and grow. And again, Aries is all about starting new things, but we may be hesitant to start new things because of issues like anger management, right? Maybe we need to manage our anger. Whenever we start something, particularly where Aries is in your chart, this is where you feel rage or frustration if things don't go according to plan, right? Maybe this retrograde season, this Chiron retrograde, is going to help you to manage that anger and stop getting so frustrated and move past that frustration. Or maybe it's self-esteem issues, right? For most of us, that's typically how it goes, right? We all kind of suffer from insecurities and self-esteem issues to some extent or another. And that prevents us from starting something new in whatever area of life Aries is in your chart, okay? Or maybe we're afraid to go after what we want because we care too much about what other people think. Whenever we talk about Aries, we simultaneously talk about Libra because Libra is the opposite sign. Aries is us, Libra is them. Libra has everything to do with relationships. And Libra tends to be people pleasing. So maybe, perhaps, we don't want to go after the things we want because other people don't want us to have it. Or maybe other people have something to say about it, or their opinion really matters to us. And rather than hear their mouth or their opinions, we just don't go after the things that we want. So this retrograde season in Aries, this Chiron retrograde season in Aries, which again runs from today until December 26th, it's really getting you to be assertive with respect to what you want, working through emotional wounds and traumas that prevent you from being assertive, from being bold, and from going after what you want confidently. All right. So now I'm going to get into what this means for each of the rising signs. Okay. Now, basically what this means is you look at your natal chart, and based on your rising sign, it'll tell you where Chiron retrograde in Aries is happening for you. Okay. Hopefully this all makes sense. And if it doesn't, either leave a question in the chat or leave a comment down below and I'll be sure to answer your questions. So first up, if you are an Aries rising, this Chiron retrograde in Aries is going down in your first house. So this is allowing you to re-examine wounds related to being or expressing yourself or going after the things that you want. Now, being that the first house has a lot to do with the self and the body, you could have body issues. You could even have body dysmorphia, I think it's called. I'm not sure of the term, but like you don't necessarily feel comfortable in your skin. Maybe you have a deformity, maybe you have a disability, and you feel like that hampers you from getting what you want. So this Chiron, or let me say this, the current Chiron as it is going through the sky is sitting in your first house. So it may be bringing up self-esteem issues or body dysmorphia issues or being able to express yourself, right? So this Chiron retrograde is allowing you to address wounds related to self-expression or body issues or self-esteem, all right? That's how this retrograde season is going to look like for Aries rising. So for Taurus rising, okay, this Chiron retrograde is going down in your 12th house of spirituality. So the 12th house also is the house of emotions, it's the house of karma, all that good stuff. So this Chiron retrograde is going to allow you opportunities to re-examine wounds related to your emotions, your sensitivities, or your faith. So this retrograde season may be highly emotional for you. You may have to address repressed emotions related to abandonment, isolation, or any wounds related to your faith, your spirituality, or how you connect with source or your higher self. Okay, that's how this particular Chiron retrograde is going to work for you. And it's important that you address whatever comes up. Don't try to escape. Don't put it under the rug. Don't engage in addictive behaviors that may make you not feel anything for a while. Whatever comes up, no matter what emotions, especially repressed emotions, feel it, re-examine it, and then release it. All right. Next up, we've got Gemini rising. So if you are a Gemini rising, this Chiron retrograde in Aries is going down in your 11th house. So this is going to give you opportunities to re-examine wounds related to self-expression or your ability to think outside the box. Okay. This also may have to do with goals and ambitions that you have for your life. So perhaps you're feeling insecure, or perhaps you have wounds that are related to speaking up, speaking your piece, inventing things, or thinking differently than everybody else. Okay. This retrograde season is going to allow you to address those and allow you to work through those wounds so that you can successfully express yourself and perhaps start something new. Maybe you are inventing something or improving on something, or maybe you are desiring to go after a very ambitious goal or something that you really want to achieve in life. This retrograde season is going to allow you to work through all of that trauma and wounding so that you can actually do those things now. Okay. Next up, we've got Cancer rising. So if you are a Cancer rising, Chiron retrograde in Aries is going down in your 10th house of success, achievement, your public life, and or your reputation. So this retrograde season is going to allow you to re-examine wounds related to success, achievement, and personal authority. So maybe you want to go a new career route. Maybe you want to start a business, or maybe you just want your time in the sun. Maybe you want some fame and notoriety or some acknowledgement, but you've got wounds that tell you you're not good enough, or that self-esteem issues that might be standing in the way of starting something new in the area of life having to do with career, business, or reputation. Okay. And so for you, Cancer rising, this is going to be an opportunity to work through those wounds, to transcend those wounds, so you can go in a new career path, or you can finally start that business, or just get the recognition that you honestly want. All right. Next up, we've got Leo rising. So if you are a Leo rising, this Chiron retrograde in Aries is going down in your 9th house of spirituality and higher learning. So for you, this is going to give you an opportunity to re-examine wounds related to expansion, taking up space, and perhaps venturing away from home. So you may be someone who wants to start an endeavor, maybe in a different country. Maybe you want to do something that's very different. Maybe you want to go to grad school, to med school, to law school, or maybe you just want to, expand your mind and broaden your horizons. But maybe you have wounds that make you feel small or limited, or make you feel like you can't go far away from home. Maybe you've got obligations here that are hampering your ability to travel or to do things in foreign places. Okay. You're going to have to examine the wounds that make you feel small or that make you feel limited with respect to these things. And if you're able to successfully work through these things, you're going to be able to start something new, maybe go and get an advanced degree or something like that, right? Maybe you have wounds where you feel like you're not smart enough, or maybe you're not going to get accepted into that grad program or into law school. Now's the time to work on those things so you can have those things that you want and to feel free and confident to expand and take up space. Okay. Next up, we've got Virgo rising. Okay, so Virgo rising, this may be a very challenging and emotional time for you, because this means that Chiron retrograde in Aries is going down in your 8th house. 8th house has a lot to do with intimacy, has a lot to do with sex, and it has a lot to do with emotional vulnerability. So this may be a time where you re-examine wounds related to intimacy, sex, emotional vulnerability, abuse, or violence. Maybe you want to have an intimate relationship. Maybe you want to consummate a relationship that you're in, but you have hangups about your body, or you have intimacy issues, or maybe you were abused sexually, and now opening up to someone, whether sexually or emotionally, is difficult for you. And it's standing in the way of you being able to have a new relationship, a relationship that's intimate, where that's vulnerable and that's authentic, right? This Chiron retrograde in Aries is going to give you the opportunity to work through those wounds so you can have the intimacy and the closeness that you ultimately want and crave. Okay. Next up, we've got Libra rising. So Libra, for you, this is illuminating your 7th house of relationships. And this is sort of up your alley. So you're familiar with this kind of energy, but it can be, it may hit home for you a lot because you're a relationship sign. And so having this go down in your house of relationships may bring up wounds that don't allow you to feel like your authentic self. So this could give you the opportunity to re-examine wounds related to commitment, fairness, or equality in relationships or relationship security. Maybe you want to start a new relationship. Maybe you've had your eye on someone and y'all have been dating, but you want to make it official. Maybe you want to be committed. Maybe you want to get married, right? But you have these hangups. Maybe it's a self-esteem thing. Maybe you don't feel good enough. Maybe you don't feel attractive enough. Maybe you don't feel like this person is going to stay, or maybe they'll reject you for who you are. It's time for you to address these wounds so that you can have a bomb-ass relationship or even get married, okay? Next up, we've got Scorpio rising. So for you, Scorpio rising, this Chiron retrograde in Aries, it pertains to your 6th house of work and health. So maybe you want to get a new job, or maybe you want to finally take charge of your health, get in better physical shape, right? But maybe you have wounds that prevent that. Maybe you feel like you're not going to get a job. You don't feel like you're good enough. Maybe you don't have the motivation, right? Because maybe you've applied to different jobs and you haven't been able to get one. Or maybe you've had health issues before. Maybe you were sick before, and addressing your health right now just feels too emotionally daunting, right? This retrograde season is going to allow you to re-examine wounds related to physical or mental health, procrastination, or lack of care, right? Maybe this is the time for you to get strong physically. And by doing so, you're going to address your emotional health first, right? Or maybe you want to have a new job, or you have a new project that you want to take on, but you don't feel motivated enough, or you don't feel like you're good enough. You may have self-esteem issues, or maybe you get frustrated when things don't go your way and it triggers anger, right? These are the things you're going to want to work through so that you can have that new job, start that new project, or finally get your health back on track. Okay. Next up, we've got Sagittarius rising. All right. So Sag rising, this retrograde season, this Chiron retrograde in Aries is going down in your 5th house of self-expression, romance, and children. So maybe you want to conceive. Maybe you want to expand your family. Maybe you want to engage in a new creative endeavor. Or maybe you want to start dating, but you've got these emotional wounds, these hangups that you feel are preventing you from having something new in these areas of your life. All right. So this current Chiron retrograde season is going to allow you to re-examine wounds related to self-expression, creativity, romance, or your inner child, right? This may be the time where you really address your inner child. How was your inner child wounded? And what does your inner child truly want right now? You know, again, Aries has a lot to do with our desires, and our inner child always wants something. They always want to either express themselves or have something or do something that maybe your adult self kind of talks that inner child out of having, doing, being, or wanting those things. So this retrograde season is going to have you really speaking to your inner child. So you may want to do inner child work, shadow work, where you sort of speak to your inner child, right? But again, in addressing these wounds, you can have all of those wonderful things that your inner child so desperately desires. Okay. Working our way to the end here. We're almost done. Next up, we've got Capricorn rising. So for you, this may be a particularly emotional retrograde season, because this is going down in your 4th house of home, family, mothering, nurturing, and basic emotional needs. Maybe you want to own a home. Maybe you want to have your own family. Maybe you have things that you want to do with family, or things that you want to start with family, but maybe you feel like you are not capable. Maybe you have self-esteem issues. Maybe you are physically not able to do these things. Maybe you are infertile, or maybe you have medical issues that may prevent you from doing these things. Or maybe when it comes to like owning a home or purchasing a home or moving, maybe you are just scared. Maybe you don't have enough courage in order to start something new. This Chiron retrograde season in Aries is going to have you re-examine those wounds. Maybe come to terms with where you are physically. Address things like mothering, like nurturing, like having your basic needs met. Shelter is one of our basic needs. And if you are someone who is looking to purchase a home, or maybe you're looking to rent a new apartment or move to a new residence or a new home, your fears with respect to having the funds to do that, to sustain this home. Maybe you don't have enough for a down payment. Maybe you're afraid you're not going to be able to afford your rent or your mortgage. These are the fears and the insecurities coming from those emotional wounds from childhood that you're going to be addressing during this Chiron retrograde season so that you can move, have a home, or do something new with your family. Okay. Next up, we got Aquarius rising. So for you, Aquarius, this may hit home for you because this particular placement is all about your third house. And your third house is your knowledge, your intellect, and your communication style. It may also have to do with your siblings. But maybe you want to start something new. Maybe you want to start teaching or learning something. Or maybe you want to do something with your siblings, but maybe you're not feeling confident enough or smart enough. Maybe you have self-esteem issues. Or maybe you have anger issues that doesn't allow you to properly work with people or teach people. Maybe you get frustrated when people don't learn what you're teaching, or maybe you're trying to learn something and you feel dumb, or you get frustrated because you don't pick things up fast enough, or maybe you learn things differently. Now is the time to examine those wounds. You're going to examine wounds related to intelligence, learning, communication, and siblings, okay? So that you can start that new project, take that course, or maybe even transact business, or just even talk to people more. Maybe you want to meet new people. Maybe you want to make new friends, but maybe you've got a physical disability. Maybe you are just self-conscious about how you speak. Maybe you feel like people aren't going to understand you. These are going to be the wounds that you work through so that you can make new friends, learn something new, or maybe start something new, like a new project or a new business idea or something like that. Okay? And last but certainly not least, we've got Pisces rising. So for you, Pisces, this may have a lot to do with your self-worth and your money because Chiron retrograde in Aries is going down in your second house. So this is going to have you re-examining wounds having to do with money, value, self-worth, and self-esteem. Maybe you want to get a new job. Maybe you want to have a new income stream. Maybe you want to start a business. Maybe you want to start a savings plan. But maybe your thoughts about money, your beliefs about money, and about your ability to make money are all fucked up. Maybe you don't feel like you can do it. Maybe you have anger issues when it comes to money. All of those things are par for the course during this Chiron retrograde in Aries season. So it's really up to you to work through your trauma with respect to money, with respect to being enough, with respect to your ability to create money and create things, period, that you're going to be working through so that you can start making money. You can get a new job, start a business, start saving, all of those things. All right. All right, my loves, thank you for tuning in. That is the end of tonight's presentation. I sincerely hope that you were able to get at least one important piece of information that you can use either with respect to your natal chart or going into this Chiron retrograde in Aries season. All right, again, thank you so much for tuning in. Have an amazing Chiron retrograde season, and I will see y'all in my next video. All right, my loves.